There are moments in your life when God intends to bring a blessing through you to someone else, but it has to come uniquely through you because there are some things only you can do. There are some needs only you can see, some hands only you can hold, some prayers only you can pray, some tears only you can cry, some gifts only you can give, some meals only you can cook. There are some people only you can reach, some moments only you can take. Think about it. God placed you in your specific family, in this generation, in this time in history, in your unique demographic situation, in this specific geographic location, so that you can make a difference there. What's your difficult step of obedience that's right in front of you? A great God made you to be great, so act like it. Don't miss your moment.
Pastor and author John Ortberg once wrote, "The Holy Spirit says, you're it. You are God's plan. In a thirsty world, people need to be refreshed. It is a broken world, and people need to be healed. Now get out there and do it." As Christians, we talk a lot about Jesus being the answer for what ails this world, as we should, because of course, he is the answer for the brokenness all around us. So we should talk about that, as long as we understand at the same time that the way Jesus heals the brokenness in this world is through us. Right? If Jesus is going to touch someone else's life, if he's going to provide for someone or extend love and compassion to them or share truth with them or heal them, he's going to do it through you. And if that sounds like a significant burden, then you're getting the idea. Because when we think about and talk about God's plan for our lives, right? When you ask the question, what is God's plan for my life? Which people ask all the time. I think often we forget that at the very center of that plan for your life, there's a cross, which you are required to continually die upon. Jesus said, if anyone would come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. Luke 9:23 says we're supposed to do that daily. For whoever would save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. Matthew 16:24 and 25. Now look, in the first century Roman world, the cross wasn't a piece of jewelry you wore around your neck. In fact, it wasn't a known symbol of faith. No, in the first century world, when Jesus said this, the cross only meant one thing: death by crucifixion. See, Jesus was saying, if you're going to be a follower of mine, then you have to live like I do. You have to deny yourself what you want, dying to yourself every single day, and then come follow me so you can learn how to share my love and my truth with the world that doesn't know the meaning of either. And this has to be, I think, the most difficult part of the gospel for most Christians to actually take hold of, the part where we accept and embrace the fact that God's unfailing plan for your life, as wonderful as it is, and it is, yet it's primarily not about you doing things for yourself. No, his plan for your life is primarily about you going places and doing things as a member of his body, an extension of himself to a world for which you are the only Jesus some people will ever see, as John MacArthur famously said. And the irony of it all is that the more you deny yourself by giving your life away to others, the more fulfilling and gratifying your own life becomes. This is the paradox of the gospel. The most self-serving thing you could ever do is to serve others, more specifically to serve Christ by serving others, because it is only then, when you're living in the very center of God's unfailing plan for your life, that you will ever be truly satisfied. This is also why the enemy's most effective and most oft employed strategy in the lives of God's people is to get us to focus on ourselves. I know this all too well in my own life, because that immediately takes us outside of God's will. Listen, he did it with Adam and Eve in the very beginning. He tried to do it with Jesus in the wilderness, and he's been doing it ever since, tempting us with the notion that I should tend to myself, my needs, my desires first and foremost, and then it's okay to do good for others with whatever I have left. But that's not what Jesus did. And it's not what he taught his disciples to do either, because his plan is for you to live a selfless life of service to him by serving other people. And what's so amazing about how God works in all of that is the fact that, again, living that way is hands down the best thing you could ever do for yourself, because of what God does to you and through you when you live like that. So what our story's about today as we continue our sermon series working our way through 1 Samuel, as Saul is being prepared by God, unbeknownst to Saul, to become Israel's first human king. And of course, if you're familiar with the story of Saul's life, you know that the moment he begins to focus on himself in later chapters, that's the moment he wanders outside of God's will. And we're going to get to all of that as we go. But in the beginning of Saul's story, as he focuses on serving others in the simplest of ways, God does the most amazing things to and through Saul as his unfailing plan unfolds in Saul's life, which is a lesson that may be needed in the church today more than ever, at least in our own lifetime. Because when you look at what is happening in the world today and all around us in this country, everyone is vying for attention. Everyone wants to put a spotlight on themselves. And of course, there are a myriad of very serious and legitimate issues that need to be addressed without question. But listen, the last thing the world needs right now is the church using the suffering and strife that's going on around us as an opportunity to promote ourselves. Because you and I aren't the answer. Jesus is. Which means when the world sees us, they need to see Jesus. So where there's racism, we need to stand against it. Where there's oppression, we need to fight against it. Where there are defenseless people being taken advantage of, we need to defend them, because talk is cheap and there are plenty of people talking right now. What the world needs from us is action, which has to be more, by the way, than simply participating in some kind of event. We're going to talk about this big event coming up that we're involved in. It's great. It's fine to do that. We should do that. But serving Christ by serving others is God's plan for your entire life, okay? Serving is supposed to be a daily matter of course in the lives of God's people, which means serving those who are suffering, loving those who have been rejected, healing those who are hurting, and providing for those who are without every single day of our lives, which also happens to be God's unfailing plan for your life, as we'll see in our story today. So let's pick it back up where we left off last time at 1 Samuel chapter 9. We'll begin with the first 10 verses, 1 Samuel 9, 1 through 10. There was a man of Benjamin whose name was Kish, the son of Abiel, the son of Zeror, son of Bechorath, son of Aphiah, a Benjaminite, a man of wealth. And he had a son whose name was Saul, a handsome young man. There was not a man among the people of Israel more handsome than he. From his shoulders upward, he was taller than any of the people. Now the donkeys of Kish, Saul's father, were lost. So Kish said to Saul his son, "Take one of the young men with you and arise, go and look for the donkeys." And he passed through the hill country of Ephraim and passed through the land of Shalishah, but they did not find them. They passed through the land of Shaalim, but they were not there. Then they passed through the land of Benjamin, but did not find them. When they came to the land of Zuph, Saul said to his servant who was with him, "Come, let us go back, lest my father cease to care about the donkeys and become anxious about us." But he said to him, "Behold, there's a man of God in this city, and he's a man who is held in honor. All that he says comes true. So now let us go there. Perhaps he can tell us the way we should go." Then Saul said to his servant, "But if we go, what can we bring the man? For the bread in our sacks is gone, and there is no present to bring to the man of God. What do we have?" The servant answered Saul again, "Here, I have with me a quarter of a shekel of silver. I will give it to the man of God to tell us our way." Formerly in Israel, when a man went to inquire of God, he said, "Come, let us go to the seer," for today's prophet was formerly called a seer. And Saul said to his servant, "Well said, come, let us go." So they went to the city where the man of God was. So the story opens up with a formal introduction of Saul and his family line, starting with his father Kish, and then a 4-generation genealogy, which was typical in ancient Semitic writings when you wanted to convey the importance and high status of a particular family within a particular tribe. So you would list their genealogy. And then when you include the phrase at the end of verse 1 that describes Saul's father as a man of wealth, which, by the way, doesn't even come close to doing the phrase justice in the ancient Hebrew, which is Gibor Kayil. It's actually a description of a mighty man of power, literally. It was the same phrase used to describe members of the nobility, particularly those of the warrior class, who later became the aristocracy. And then as the story progresses, we learn that Saul's family not only had slaves and donkeys, but also oxen, which is very rare to have all of that. And so it becomes clear that this is one of the most influential families in Benjamin. And so Saul's pedigree is second to none among the Israelites, certainly in the Benjaminite tribe. And on top of all that, there are multiple allusions to his impressive physical stature, including his height, the fact that he was taller than any of the other Israelites and the best looking among them as well, which of course at a cursory reading seems like sort of a random and odd detail to throw into the story. And yet there's actually very good reason for including this physical description of the man who is soon to be their king. You'll remember, if you were here, that the Israelites back in chapter 8, verses 5, demanded a king, and I'm quoting, like all the nations. That would be all of the pagan Gentile nations around them, rejecting God as their king in the process. And here's the crazy part about that. When you look at the other people groups described as being tall in the Hebrew Bible, it was always the enemies of Israel. The Nephilim in Numbers 13:33, the Emim and Anakites in Deuteronomy 2:10, Goliath in 1 Samuel 17:4, the 4 descendants of the giants from Gath, including the giant with 6 fingers and 6 toes in 2 Samuel 21:15 through 22. There was a notable Egyptian in 1 Chronicles 11:23, the Cushites in Isaiah 18:1 and 2, and the Sabaeans in Isaiah 45:14, not to mention the Amorites in Amos 2:9. In other words, okay, you say you want a king just like all the pagan nations around you. Well, that's exactly what you're going to get, right down to the last detail. And so this was an impressive specimen of a man from a powerful, wealthy, influential, and highly respected, prestigious family line being sent out by his father to find some lost donkeys. About as thankless of a job that anyone could do. And certainly it was a job anyone could do. And yet Kish, this powerful, wealthy, influential man, sends his own son, who notably we hear no protest from. Saul simply does what his father tells him to do. And in the bare limestone hills of Ephraim and the surrounding areas, loose farm animals could easily stray a long way. So Saul and his servant travel for several days, basically in a large circle, returning close to Ramah without locating the donkeys. And so they come to Zuph, the land of Samuel's ancestors in the hill country of Ephraim, and Saul surveys his situation. And not only are they out of food, out of money, out of supplies, with no donkeys in sight, but he's also now thinking about his father, who at this point is probably more concerned about his missing son than he is his missing donkeys. So Saul suggests they head back home empty-handed in every way, until Saul's servant suggests that they attempt to make contact with the local man of God first. In the Old Testament, by the way, the terms seer, prophet, man of God are used almost indistinguishably. So Saul would have known that his servant was referring to a prophet. And yet at this point, again, as far as Saul knows, they're out of food, out of money, out of supplies. So he says to his servant, look, if we go, what are we going to bring this guy? Right? The bread in our sacks is gone. We have no food to offer him. There's no present to bring the man of God. What do we have? And it was customary in antiquity to take a present or an offering when seeking help from a seer. We see that in Amos 7:12, 1 Kings 14:3, 2 Kings 5:5, and also chapter 8, verses 8 and 9. Just a few examples of that. And so exchanging gifts was like an integral part of social dealings in the ancient world in general, but more specifically, it was common courtesy when you're consulting with a prophet or a seer. And so the servant reveals to Saul that he has a quarter of a shekel of silver stashed away. So literally down to their last penny. And yet they're more than willing to pay it and continue to go without food or supplies if it means getting the donkeys back for Saul's father. Okay, so for all of Saul's shortcomings, for all of his sin and disobedience, all of which comes out in later chapters, he didn't start out that way because he wasn't focused on himself. Not at this point. He was focused on serving someone else, and in this case, it was his father, to the point he's even willing to go hungry and without any other supplies needed for travel if it means being able to help his father in finding these lost animals. And yet, this is also a last-ditch effort for Saul, who's already brought up their lack of supplies and money and extended time away wandering around the hill country of Ephraim. Okay, for Saul, now hungry, broke, far from home, no closer to his goal now than he was when he started. This has to feel like one of the most insignificant, self-defeating, and random set of circumstances of his entire privileged life. And yet, as we'll see soon enough, this was not only all God's doing, it was these very circumstances, these miserable, seemingly random, insignificant circumstances that God was using to lead Saul straight into his destiny as king. Look, God has an unfailing plan for your life. It's a plan that he authored for you long before you were ever born. And every day, every moment, every breath you take factors in to that unfailing plan, which means no matter how miserable, how random, or how seemingly insignificant the direction of your life may feel to you at any given point in time, in every single one of those days, even the miserable, random, insignificant, forgettable days, God is leading you. He's always leading you. And where God leads you is exactly where he wants you. Saul never could have imagined that day the destiny he was about to walk into, and yet literally overnight with everything in his life, it was all about to change, because even in those barren hills, hungry, broke, and exhausted, he was exactly where God wanted him to be. Listen, I know for some of you, you feel like you're wandering right now. Like your life has no real direction, no significant purpose. There's no light at the end of the tunnel you're in. And as long as it has felt that way, you still don't feel one day closer to the life you're longing for. I'm telling you, as far away from your destiny as you may feel right now, you're exactly where God wants you to be, because you didn't get to where you are right now by chance. It may feel that way, but there is no chance in God's kingdom. There's only him, his people, and his unfailing plans for your life. Which means you got to where you are right now because God's unfailing plan for your life has led you there. And as much as you can't see it from where you're standing now, I'm telling you, just over the next hill, just over the next horizon, your destiny awaits. And when you get there, everything in your life is going to change. And it's not as if you don't have a part to play in God's plan for your life coming to fruition. You certainly do. We'll talk about that in a moment. But listen, his plan for your life is an unfailing plan. It cannot be overcome by the plans of the enemy or the plans of this world. Listen, not even the mistakes you make along the way. You understand? Your mistakes, no matter how bad they may be, cannot overcome God's unfailing plan for your life. Your mistakes cannot overcome God's unfailing plan for your life. Now, how all of that plays out in your life and the timing of it all, well, that certainly can be affected by our response to his leading. Right? So our disobedience, which is dealt with again in the chapters ahead, certainly plays into how things unfold in our lives. In other words, how well we follow his leading can certainly affect the quality and timing of the journey. By the way, you understand we're not talking about lost people here, unbelievers. That's an entirely different sermon for another day. Right now, we're talking about born-again believers and followers of Jesus Christ. Your sins have been atoned for, and your eternal destiny sealed forevermore. Psalm 139 says, in your book were written every one of them, the days that were formed for me, when as yet there were none of them. And yet things like obedience obviously still are paramount in affecting your journey with God. And we'll get into that more as we go. The point being, what you do or don't do can certainly have a direct bearing on how long it takes you to get over that hill or to the next horizon with your destiny in Christ. But listen, he's still leading. He's always leading. You just have to follow, which calls attention to another aspect of this story with Saul. Because look, if Saul had been primarily focused on himself on this journey to find these lost donkeys, he probably would have given up long before now, right? Hungry, broke, haven't seen anything for days. Yet he continues to press on. Why? Because his primary focus isn't on himself. It's on serving his Father. I'm just telling you, look, it's really important that we get this before we move on here. Because the only way you're ever going to discover your calling in this life is through serving others. In fact, it is impossible to discover God's calling on your life while you're serving yourself. Why? Because God's calling on your life is not about you serving you. It's about you serving Him by serving others. And so look, if you're serious about wanting to fulfill the call of Christ on your life, and you have yet to discover how you're supposed to do that, then start serving God's people. Start serving God's people. Doesn't matter how. It doesn't matter. Just start serving. And I guarantee you, you will find your purpose. Maybe not immediately, but you will over time through faithful, committed, consistent service. Doesn't matter if it's not your passion. Doesn't matter if it's not your ideal area of ministry. Doesn't matter if it's not always something you love doing. It doesn't matter. Just serve. People tell me all the time, well, I don't have the gift of evangelism. I'm not called to be an evangelist. I'm not either. So what? Does that mean you're not supposed to tell people about Jesus? Now listen, where you begin very well may not be the area of service or ministry you end up in, but I promise you, the way you get there to your ultimate destiny and calling is by serving others, even if you don't start where you end up. I have served in about almost every area of local church ministry as an adult that you can imagine. In fact, for 18 years, I served in just about every area of church ministry before I was ever given an opportunity or even came to the realization that God created me to be a pastor of a local church. 18 years before that, I served in the church with no clue I would be doing this. That realization only came because I was already serving in the local church in all these other areas. And through that faithful service in nearly every other area of ministry in the church, except this one behind the pulpit, through those years of faithful service, I'm talking about a lot of long, at times, frustrating, seemingly random, insignificant, forgettable days, I was given an opportunity to fill in a senior pastoral position, just a fill-in guy within a church that was searching to hire someone to permanently fill that position. It was a church I was working at. So you understand, the only reason I was even asked to fill in as the pastor of that church was because I was already there serving in that church faithfully. And through that experience, what had never once even for a moment entered my mind, the idea of pastoring a local church, not for 1 second had I ever imagined that to be my calling in life. All of a sudden, it became crystal clear. This is what I'm supposed to do the rest of my life. This is what He designed and created me for. And it only took 18 years of service to others in just about every other area of ministry for me to figure that out. But you see, the whole time, God was leading me because I wasn't ready yet. And so even in the mundane, forgettable days, the insufferable setbacks, Even times when it felt like I was wandering aimlessly, I can see so clearly now how all the while I was exactly where I was supposed to be because God was leading me, preparing me, training me in his unfailing plan for my life, even though I couldn't always see it at the time. I have a significant grasp on how everything in the church works because of all those years doing it. So look, don't stop serving, even when it feels like aimless wandering. Keep serving Christ by serving others faithfully. And I promise you, his unfailing plan for your life, including all those days when it seems like what you're doing is insignificant. I'm telling you, you'll look back on those days and you'll realize it was him leading you all along. Author Mark Hart says, the man who built the manger had a purpose in mind. God had another. You'll never know how far-reaching God's plan is for your work. Let's keep reading, verses 11 through 21. As they went up to the hill to the city, they met young women coming out to draw water and said to them, "Is the seer here?" They answered, "He is. Behold, he's just ahead of you. Hurry. He's come just now to the city because the people have a sacrifice today on the high place. As soon as you enter the city, you'll find him before he goes up to the high place to eat. For the people will not eat till he comes, since he must bless the sacrifice. Afterward, those who are invited will eat. Now go up, for you will meet him immediately." So they went up to the city. As they were entering the city, they saw Samuel coming out toward them on his way up to the high place. Now the day before Saul came, the Lord had revealed to Samuel, "Tomorrow about this time, I will send you a man from the land of Benjamin. You shall anoint him to be a prince over my people Israel. He shall save my people from the hand of the Philistines, for I've seen my people because their cry has come to me." When Samuel saw Saul, the Lord told him, "Here is the man of whom I spoke to you. He it is who shall restrain my people." Then Saul approached Samuel in the gate and said, "Tell me, where is the house of the seer?" Samuel answered, "Saul, I am the seer. Go up before me to the high place, for today you shall eat with me, and in the morning I will let you go and will tell you all that is on your mind. As for your donkeys, they were lost 3 days ago. Do not set your mind on them, for they've been found. And for whom is all that is desirable in Israel? Is it not for you and for all your father's house?" Saul answered, "Am I not a Benjaminite, from the least of the tribes of Israel? And is not my clan the humblest of all the clans of the tribe of Benjamin? Why then have you spoken to me in this way?" So Saul and his servant approached the city, which was on a hill, and yet the water that supplied the cities, both springs and wells, were typically found at lower elevations down in the valleys, and it was generally the young maiden's job to walk down daily to those sources of water. And so as Saul and his servant approached the city well, they asked the young women if the seer is in the city, to which they reply, "He is. Behold, he's just ahead of you. Hurry. He has just come now to the city." So Samuel has just returned from traveling his usual circuit as described, if you'll remember back in chapter 7, verse 16, acting as Israel's chief prophet and judge. And to the unbeliever, of course, this would seem like an extraordinary stroke of good luck for Samuel to just happen to be arriving home at the very moment Saul and his servant get there. And yet as the story continues, it becomes undeniably clear that this was no stroke of luck. This was the hand of God at work as his plan for Saul continues to unfold. As verse 15 tells us, now the day before Saul came, the Lord had revealed to Samuel, "Tomorrow about this time I will send you a man from the land of Benjamin and shall anoint him to be prince over my people." And sure enough, right on cue, the next day Saul walks into the city. Verse 17, when Samuel saw Saul, the Lord told him, "Here is the man of whom I spoke to you." Obviously, God is way ahead of everyone else in this story, working things out before them exactly as he'd planned it. And so the two meet, and Samuel says to Saul, "I'm the seer. Go up before me to the high place, for today you shall eat with me, and in the morning I'll let you go and will tell you all that is on your mind." Right? The full name of Samuel's city was Ramathaim, which is translated literally as 2 hills, meaning the city was on one hill. The high place where they made sacrifices was on another. And so Samuel says, "Go up to the other hill and wait for me there so we can eat together. And by the way, don't worry about your donkeys. They've been found. Oh, and one more thing. You're the man that all of Israel has been waiting for." You think Saul's going to sleep tonight? He says, hey man, I'm nothing special, right? I'm a Benjaminite from the least of the tribes of Israel. Is not my clan the humblest of all the clans of the tribe of Benjamin? Why then have you spoken to me this way? What an incredible statement of humility. And although Saul's family was wealthy, a prominent family as we described in the tribe of Benjamin, the tribe of Benjamin was nearly wiped out back in Judges chapter 20. And being the youngest of Jacob's 12 sons, Benjamin's family line was rather undistinguished compared to the others. So understandably, Saul's a bit dumbfounded. As far as he knows, he's just out looking for some donkeys. And yet as he walks into this city, he immediately meets the man he's looking for, the greatest prophet in all of Israel, who already knows who Saul is, knows all about what Saul is doing, all about the donkeys Saul is looking for. And to top it all off, he invites Saul to dinner as the guest of honor. Now, this is just like God. While you're out on what seems like a fool's errand, so far away from where you think your life should be, not doing what you think you should be doing with your life. And all the while, God is preparing the next leg of your journey ahead of you. I've told you this story before. Some of you have heard this, I'm sure. I was down in Greenville one day getting my new lenses in my glasses, and so I went in and dropped them off, and they said, come back in an hour or two, whatever it was, and we'll have them ready. So I went out and got in my truck, and I was just sitting in the parking lot, and unless I'm sleeping or laying on a beach, I just don't like being idle. I'm just not wired that way. I need to feel productive. And so at the end of every day, if I feel like I've had a productive day, I'm generally in a good mood. If I feel like I've not been productive, I'm bummed out. That's just the way that I am. I need to be productive. I need to be doing something. And so I was sitting in my truck, and I thought, geez, like what a waste of time. I'm just going to sit here and wait for them to finish my glasses. So I started to pray, and I said, Lord, what would you have me do with this time? If there's something you would like for me to do, could you please reveal that to me? And I'm telling you, in about 3 seconds, the Holy Spirit said to me, go into that furniture store over there. I said, what? He said, go into that furniture store over there. And I looked over, and there's a huge furniture store right next to the little strip mall that the glasses place is in, and the parking lot was empty. I said, Lord, are you sure? And I could just feel him saying, you asked me. Now go into that store. Okay, so I drove over. I walked into this huge furniture store. It was empty. It was open. And I'm just wandering around aimlessly, and this lady walks up to me, and she works there. And she said, excuse me, can I help you? I said, no, I'm just killing time waiting for my glasses to be made next door. She said, well, good. Can I kill time with you? Because it's dead in here, and there's nothing going on. I said, sure. So we start walking around. We're talking about furniture and life. And she said, what do you do for a living? I said, I'm a pastor. And she stopped walking, and she said, okay, then I need to talk to you about something other than furniture. I said, sure. She said, 9 days ago, my husband had a massive heart attack. He survived it and made it through the surgery, and he's in the hospital now recovering. She said, we've never been particularly religious, but when I was sitting with my husband after he had woken up from the surgery and was in his right mind enough to talk, he said, honey, I need to tell you about something. He said, well, at some point through all of this, I went to a place, at least in my mind, and the best way I can describe it would be what I think hell would be like. And he described a horrible scene. And he said, it really frightened me. And when I woke up, I decided you and I need to do something about that. So maybe when I get out of here, we could try going to church together. And she said, okay. And so she turned to me and she said, listen, I know you said you're a pastor of a local church. We're down here in Greenville and I work here. But we don't live here. And I don't particularly want to drive a long way through traffic on weekends with my husband's condition to get him to church. And so I don't know if you're familiar with it, but there's a little town north of here that we live in. It's called Travelers Rest. She said, I know it's a stupid question, but do you happen to know of any churches in Travelers Rest that would be worth trying? I said, well, I know there's one. And I told her about Upcountry Church. They came here, received Christ. They were here, worshiped with us for a time, and they've moved on, moved away. It seemed so insignificant that day to me. Even a drudgery to go get glasses made. I hate things like that. They're just like busy stuff, and I have important things to do. But you know, God had an appointment for me with that woman before either one of us were ever created. God is always preparing the next leg of your journey ahead of you. It's precisely how God works in the lives of his people, okay? When God calls you, he goes before you. Now listen, as human beings, we, of course, are limited by space and time. That's an inescapable reality of the human condition. We cannot go back to the past and change what has already happened. We cannot travel into the future and determine what is yet to happen, which, of course, we all know. The problem is, we often tend to assign our own human limitations on God. It's our nature to interact with God as if he's contained by the same limitations we are, but God is uncontainable. He has no limitations. He dwells outside of space and time. He's omnipresent, everywhere, all at once. He's omnipotent, all-powerful over all of space and time, all at once. He's omniscient, all-knowing, and in control of all space and time, all at once. And so he's with you right now, and he always will be, just as Jesus said, behold, I'm with you always to the end of the age, Matthew 28:20. And yet he's not only with you right now, he is in your future right now, aligning all of your circumstances and all of your encounters and all of your relationships ahead of time so that his unfailing plan for your life unfolds exactly as he desires it to. It's also why the Apostle John said, and this is the confidence that we have toward him, that if we ask anything according to his will, he hears us. And if we know that he hears us in whatever we ask, we know that we have the request that we've asked of him. 1 John 5:14 and 15, because God has already gone ahead of you and established his unfailing plan for your life so that when you pray according to what he's already accomplished for you, it's guaranteed to happen because he's already gone before you. And he's already taken care of it. Do you understand? This is why he calls us to follow him. Right? Because people say, well, how do I get to that point in the future? You follow Jesus. He wants to lead you down that path, a path that he's already prepared and laid out for you as you continue to serve him in his will for your life through serving others. Right? But the problem for most of us is, look, if we're just going to be honest for a second, I think most of us spend most of our prayer life not trying to follow God, but actually trying to convince him to follow us. We do. We pray, hey, God, okay, here's what I'm thinking. Here's where I'm trying to get to. This is what I want. So this is what I'm going to need from you in order for this plan, my plan, to work out. You understand when you pray like that, what you're doing is you're trying to lead God where you're going instead of following him where he's going. And so how we should pray is, hey, God, please reveal the next step in your unfailing plan for my life, and then help me to faithfully follow you there as I continue to serve you right where I am. That's called praying according to God's will, not your will. And when you pray according to his will, you're guaranteed to get what you asked for because he's already gone ahead of you and prepared the way. Which means you don't have to fret about tomorrow. With everything going on in our world right now, with everything going on in your life right now, with all of what seems to us to be uncertainty, we don't have to fret about tomorrow because God is already there taking care of tomorrow for you. And so instead of being fearful for tomorrow, let's just be faithful today, faithful to follow him down the path of his unfailing plan for our lives by serving him as we serve others, even when you can't see what tomorrow holds. A.W. Tozer once said, God's plan will continue on God's schedule. Let's finish the story for today, verse 22 to the end of the chapter. Then Samuel took Saul and his young men and brought them into the hall and gave them a place at the head of those who had been invited, who were about 30 persons. And Samuel said to the cook, bring the portion I gave you, of which I said to you, put it aside. So the cook took up the leg and what was on it and set them before Saul. And Samuel said, see, what was kept is set before you. Eat, because it was kept for you until the hour appointed, that you might eat with the guests. So Saul ate with Samuel that day, and when they came down from the high place into the city, a bed was spread for Saul on the roof, and he lay down to sleep. Then at the break of dawn, Samuel called to Saul on the roof, "Up, that I may send you on your way." So Saul arose, and both he and Samuel went out into the street. As they were going down to the outskirts of the city, Samuel said to Saul, "Tell the servant to pass on before us, and when he's passed on, stop here yourself for a while, that I may make known to you the word of God." In ancient Hebrew culture, the seating arrangement at a dinner table had a special protocol, and to be at the head of the table was a high honor. On top of that, Saul was given the leg of meat, which was the portion normally set aside for the priests, according to Exodus 29:27. This was a sacred portion of food given to Saul. And then returning to the city after the meal, Saul is given the most desirable sleeping location of all, the top of the roof where the cool night breeze all night long makes for the best sleeping conditions. And then finally, the next morning, Saul himself escorts Saul to the edge of the city, which was an honor in and of itself, where he reveals God's plan for Saul to be a king of Israel. This is an astoundingly unpredictable turn of events for Saul. One day ago, he's wandering the countryside, hungry, broke, without any hope of finding his father's livestock. And now, after being the honored guest at a feast at Samuel's table, fed the very choicest food, given the finest place to stay, and if you read on into the next chapter, he's anointed king and is provided for the next step in God's plan for his life. What a drastic turn of events as God so unexpectedly provides exactly what Saul needed to carry out God's plan for his life in that moment, which is exactly how God works in the lives of his people today, okay? What God plans for you, he will provide for. Look, God will never call you to something that he won't also equip you for. But here's the part you got to remember. That doesn't mean he's going to give you everything you need before you ever get started. Because most of the time, he gives you what you need as you need it. Yet I can't tell you how many people I meet who are, by their own admission, not yet doing what they know God has called them to do because they don't have all the resources needed to carry out that calling. As if they can't do anything until they have everything. See, I'm just telling you, if you're waiting for everything you need to do everything God has called you to do before you do anything, well, you're going to be waiting for a very long time. For Saul to be able to set out on the next leg of his journey with God, he needed a good meal, a solid night's rest, and some direction. And that's exactly what he got. Exactly what was needed, exactly when it was needed. If Saul had stayed at the edge of town after Samuel anointed him king and said, "Okay, as soon as my army shows up with my chariots and weapons to take me to my palace, the seat of my wealth and power, then I'll start off on the next leg of my journey, the next chapter of my story." In which case, the dust left from Samuel's dead body would still be sitting there at the edge of that town today, because that's not how God works. No, he progressively leads you down the path of his unfailing plan for your life day after day. That's why you have to take up your cross daily, day after day, and follow him. Because every single day, every new day, he gives you exactly what you need to face the challenges of that calling for that day when you need it. And so the question is, what are you waiting for? If you're not doing what God has called you to do, what are you waiting for? When we started this church, we didn't have all the money we needed, not by a long shot. We didn't have all the people we needed. We didn't have all the experience or wisdom or talent we needed. In fact, what we didn't have was a much longer list than what we did have. But it turns out we had what we needed for that first step, that first day, that first service, that first sermon, that first group of people who would walk through our doors and come to find out. That's all we needed for that day. And it's been that way ever since, because that's how God works. Okay, Pastor Rob, so what do I do now? I know what God has called me to, and I know I don't have everything I need to carry out that calling, so what first step am I supposed to take? The answer is, start serving. Doesn't matter where or how, or the fact that where you start may not be where you end up. It doesn't matter. Just start serving Christ by serving other people like he did. It's called following him. And as you do that, he will lead you exactly where you need to be, exactly when you need to be there, with exactly what you need to carry that out all along the way, day after day after day. That's his unfailing plan for your life. It's not primarily about you doing things for you. It's about going places and doing things as he leads you and provides for you day by day, sharing the love of Christ and the truth of Christ with the world that doesn't know the meaning of either. And my goodness, if ever in our lifetime this world needed the love and truth of Christ, it's now. Which means we need to do more than attend an event and make a meaningful post on social media about it. That's fine. But you understand, if Jesus is going to actually touch someone's life, if he's going to actually provide for someone or extend love and compassion to them or share the truth with them or heal them, he's going to do it through you. As you provide for them and you love them and you share the truth with them and you mend them, which is not only a significant burden to bear, it also happens to be God's unfailing plan for your life. Let's pray.